What does it mean that God arranges situations, conditions, in which people pass away and nobody can say Kaddish for them? And we're talking about some very special people. How is it that they don't get to have Kaddish said for them? Now that can be taken very negatively. It's such a punishment. It is so bad. What is going on? What did we do wrong? Or you can see it in the exact opposite way. Under normal circumstances, when a person passes away, they need the benefits that Kaddish brings to make the painful adjustment to heaven from earth. And we say Kaddish for 11 months to help that process, make it faster, make it easier, less painful. When God arranges a circumstance where a person passes away and nobody can say Kaddish for them, what is God telling us? Perhaps he's saying these people, they don't need Kaddish. It's fine. Under normal circumstances, people need Kaddish, but not under these circumstances. They're going straight to heaven and they don't need your Kaddish to help clear the way for them. There is something awesome going on. And we have to appreciate that this is mind-boggling. What does it mean we can't go to shul? We can't daven with a minyan. I'm thinking on Pesach, am I going to be able to say the Berchas Kohanim, the priestly blessings? And if not, it would mean that the Jewish people today don't need blessings from the Kohen. Just like we don't need the minyan to be able to daven properly, and we don't need the Kaddish to get to heaven. Something is really awesome. Some change in the reality of things. So, I just want to mention this idea. We're going to be celebrating the Rebbe's birthday on the 11th of the month, Shabbos. If you remember the incident in Poway, in California, and Rabbi Goldstein, who amazed everybody with his presence of mind and with his clarity of vision and with his positive message, he became an instant folk hero. And what did he say? He said, our response to darkness is to bring in more light. And people got the impression that that was like an old traditional thing in the Jewish community, that when there's an increase of darkness, we respond by increasing light. But if you think about it, that was never our method. It's not true. There were occasions where the darkness was very bad and we picked up arms and went to war, like Hanukkah, Purim, or the fight against communism led by the previous Rebbe. It was a fight to the finish. It was not add light. It was destroy that darkness. Like President Reagan said, take down that wall. The Rebbe said, and this is the first time in history, that our response to darkness is an increase in light. The more common response for most of our history was, don't make waves. If you can't have a yeshiva in the city, so move it to the town, to the suburb. If you can't have it above ground, have it underground. But don't make waves. That was the response. That was the way we survived. Only the Rebbe introduced this idea, and only in our generation, that the response to darkness is more light. And that tells us something that we would never know on our own. And it's really what we need a Rebbe for. Something cosmic has shifted. Something in the heaven of heavens has changed. The darkness that used to exist is no more. We are making progress. The darkness that used to exist cannot exist anymore because the good has overwhelmed the bad. So what kind of darkness are we left with today? The darkness that is the absence of light. Because there's a darkness that is palpable. It's its own existence. God created light and God created darkness. That kind of darkness you have to fight. You have to destroy it. You have to crush it. Like communism. But now, after the fall of communism, which by the way is absolutely messianic, because nobody fired a shot. It's self-destructed. So now that communism is gone, the darkness of our generation is the darkness of ignorance, of absence of light, or a shortage of light. And in that ignorance and in that lack of light, what's left is a darkness, but it's a different kind of darkness. The darkness of today that Rebbe notified us, if you fight it, you make it stronger. You give it more substance than it has. It's only the absence of light. So naturally, how do you fix it? Bring in more light. Because its entire existence is simply the absence of light. It's interesting that this virus, the difference between a virus and bacteria. Bacteria are alive. Bacteria are living substances. Some of them good, some of them bad. But there is good bacteria. Because where there's life, there's always something good. But viruses are not living cells or living substances. They're parasites. They have no life of their own. They look for life to get it from that which is alive. So a virus is basically an absence of light, an absence of life. The solution is bring in more life. We have to be more enthusiastic about life. We have to celebrate life more intensely, with more joy, more optimism, because to the degree that your life is vibrant and strong, to that degree, the virus can't siphon life off of it, can't get to it. And without siphoning life, viruses have none. So the real proper response to a virus illness is to boost the immune system, meaning be more enthusiastic about life. And that's why it's so important to maintain a positive attitude, an optimistic attitude, an enjoyment of life, because to the degree that you enjoy life, to that degree you reject lifelessness. So you can't complain about the evils and the ugliness of death unless you appreciate, to the same degree, you appreciate life. If life is precious, then death is terrible. So the more precious life is, the more we reject the absence or the opposite of life, and we don't let the viruses get hold and siphon life from us. Now, in some way, this revelation that the Rebbe gave us fuels all Chabad activity. For example, stop a man on the street, and if he's Jewish, ask him to put on tefillin. It never happened before. Never. And what was the reason? Well, before you ask him to put on tefillin, shouldn't you ask him if he believes in God? What if he's an atheist? He should still put on tefillin? And his tefillin are meaningful and holy and godly, valuable to the creator of the world? No one ever thought that way. First, you got to get rid of the evil. Shouldn't the guy at least first wash his hands? Go to the mikveh. Stop eating non-kosher food. Then you can put on tefillin. The Rebbe said, no. Don't ask him any questions and don't give him any conditions. The way he is, right there in the street, ask him to put on tefillin. And when he does, it is going to give God infinite pleasure. Which means the unholiness of today need not stop us from doing the holiest things. It used to. When the darkness was a substance of darkness, when the unholy was substantial, you had to get it out of the way before you could do godly, holy things. But not today. And only a Rebbe could tell us this. Only a Rebbe would know this. No conditions. You're Jewish, roll up your sleeve. What kind of a Jew? I don't care. Doesn't make a difference. You are ready to do something very holy. And whatever unholiness you're carrying around, it will disappear when you bring in the holy. By turning on the light, darkness disappears. And in fact, if you start to worry about the darkness, you're strengthening it. It's the wrong response. So instead of fighting anti-Semitism, what we need to do is produce pro-Semitism. We have to be the teachers of the world. We have to understand that there's a terrible ignorance, a lack of knowledge, a lack of information that can make people do really ridiculous things. And we're available to teach, to inspire, to share what we know, what we heard at Mount Sinai when God spoke to us. We're here to spread the light of Torah, not some mystical light. The light of God's purpose in creating us in the first place. And it turns out that the only thing we really need, what are we missing today? We have everything, except maybe goodwill. And the lack of goodwill comes from a lack of direction. We just don't know what's right, so we dabble in all sorts of possibilities, experiments, but we're desperate to know what is right. And that's why the world is turning to the Torah, to see what is the purpose of creation. Why are we here? Because just to hang around and work hard to not starve or to not freeze and to not die, it doesn't make sense to us anymore. The farmer used to get up early to milk the cow and plow the fields because you had to. Why did you have to? Well, you're going to die. That motivated almost everything. all the progress, everything we did to arrive at this point of civilization is because we're resisting the darkness. We don't want to die. But to live just so that you don't die is circular reasoning. Don't die so you can live. And why do I live? Not to die. Where are we going with this? This is a treadmill. People are not impressed anymore with the threat. Tell me what my life should be. Don't threaten me with death. I need something a little more substantial than that. And the only place you're going to find out what life is about is if the Creator tells you. Where did the Creator tell us? In the Torah. And when this tragedy is over, and it will be very soon, it'll disappear as suddenly as it appeared. And when it does, we're not going back to business as usual. We've outgrown that. For example, what's going to happen to the economy, the world economy? We're going to go back to business, starting from scratch, bankrupt, and pulling hard to catch up to what we once had? No. It's a whole new world. Business is going to be different. It has a different flavor. It has a different purpose. It's not going to be a rat race. It's not going to be cutthroat. It's going to be cooperative. People are going to help each other. And the economy is going to boom. The wealth that we're going to produce has never been seen before. It's going to be a vast improvement on what once was. So we're not going back when this is over. We're going forward. We're going up in everything. Couples who had miserable relationships, painful, ugly, and now they're forced to be together. And strangely, they're getting to like each other. See, when we sober up, when all the things we thought we had to have and couldn't live without, and all of a sudden we don't have to have, and we can live without, we're not as petty as we used to be. We're not as arrogant as we used to be. We're not as greedy as we used to be, because it's not available anymore. Now couples are looking at each other with a whole new appreciation. It's much better than any therapy in the world. They just start to like each other because they mean so much to each other. So when people made all those jokes at the beginning of this quarantine, home alone, 24 hours with your spouse, oh my God, how are we going to survive this? And then your kids are going to be home, they're not going to go to school. What are we going to do? It's going to drive us crazy. Turns out that we're starting to like it. And now, looking back, it's like shocking. Can you believe that only a few weeks ago, the thought of being more than 2 hours in a row with your children was frightening? An uncomfortable thought? Is there something wrong with this lifestyle? You dread being alone with your spouse? Something's wrong. What kind of a life is that? You run away from home, you run away from your family, you run away from your marriage, and do busy stuff just to not have to be home. So you leave where life happens, where life is centered, and you engage in all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with life. Entertainment, sports, shopping, travel, none of it essential to life. And yet we started to think that that was life. If you have a good career, you have a life. Now we realize, no, that's not a life. That's a commentary on life. You have a good career, you make a good living, you bring the money home to your family. Because that's where you live. That's where life happens. So a lot of good stuff is coming to the surface because of this shakeup, or some people say the reset button on lives. We're resetting our lives, and it's much better, much better. Now, of course, for those who are suffering, there are no words to describe the tragedy of not being able to be in the hospital with them in their last moments. But we can't let the pain overwhelm the pleasure. So as long as we are alive till the very last minute, we have to celebrate life intensely. You never give in. You never surrender to the negative. We also don't lose respect for life. People are thinking, there's a plague. There's a virus going around everywhere. No one is safe. People are dying from the plague. No, life is far more valuable than a plague or a virus. Life can't be a victim to a virus. How can you be so disrespectful to life itself? That's not possible, and we shouldn't be thinking that way. Nobody dies because there's a virus going around. Nobody is dying in vain. Nobody is dying for no reason. So it doesn't really matter what the official cause of death is. Death is bad. We're against it, we resist it, we refuse it, we don't respect it, and we can't let it intimidate us. It's bad. And so we don't throw up our hands and say, ooh, this is a powerful, this is going to get us. This is going to take many, many lives. You don't think that way, because that's giving in. That's surrendering a little bit of life to the powers of darkness, of death. We don't do that. And that's another thing that Rebbe taught us. Even in our vocabulary, don't introduce death, ever, ever. My mother, a very wise woman, she really got upset when we would use, in Yiddish, when we would use the word cold to describe ourselves. We couldn't say, I am cold. My mother would get so upset. A living person is not cold. The room is cold. You feel cold. Don't ever say, I am cold. So we don't allow death even in a suggestion in our language. The Rebbe didn't like the word undertaking because it sounds like undertaker. So we have to live fully and completely reject death from our lives. And that's why when it does happen, we grieve. Loss of life is totally unacceptable. And it really doesn't matter what the technical cause is. So it's death that we object to, not death by corona. Every death is unacceptable. So here we are on the eve of Pesach, on the eve of the Rebbe's birthday, in the month that is one of the better months for the Jewish people historically. This thing started in the month of Adar, which is a very good month for Jews, and it continues into the month of Nisan, which is also a very good month for the Jews. It's a month of miracles. So we should expect that this thing is going to end soon, and it's going to end in surrendering to a much better world, a healthier world, a godlier world. And isn't that what the world was created for? So let's be optimistic. Let's respect life, celebrate life, live life fully. You're home alone with your spouse, make it the best time ever. Be there, be good, be kind, be respectful, be considerate. All the things you meant to be. And with your children, this is such a blessing. We always complain we don't have enough time with our children. And then we send them out of the house and run away in the opposite direction. Give your children a lot of attention. They need you and you need them. Now is a good time to do it. And don't worry if what you're doing is not perfect. We're going to be making a Seder, right? Many people will be making a Seder for the first time in their lives. They don't know how to make a Seder. Sure, you can follow the instructions in the Haggadah, but don't make mistakes. And God doesn't mind. He doesn't mind. He's saying, I want to be at your Seder. You don't know how to do it? Try. I'm not that particular. The fact that you're making a Seder and inviting me to that Seder because you're doing the mitzvah, that's what I enjoy, that's what I love. So God will be at your Seder, Eliyahu will be coming to your Seder, your father in heaven or grandfather will be coming to the Seder, because this is an infinite project. It's happening on earth, it's happening in heaven. Pesach is everywhere. So when you ask the 4 questions, who are you asking it of? Your father and your grandfather. So when you ask those 4 questions, their souls will come to the Seder, will be there with you, so that you are not alone, and they will get immense pleasure from your Seder. And if it's not perfect, well, God didn't expect perfection. Making a Seder is perfect. How well you do it will never be perfect. So God is saying, if you follow the instructions to the best of your ability, because you want to do my mitzvah, that is so perfect, that is so infinite, that if you forget a word or you mix up the order of things, it doesn't detract from the pleasure that this gives me. Even if you're completely alone, one person sitting in a little apartment, trying their best to make a Seder, and all they know is that there's matzah and there's wine. That is so perfect. So let's not think negative. People are not having Kaddish said, they probably don't need it. We're not going to have a minyan, we probably don't need it. You don't know how to make a Seder perfectly, then you don't need to. All God wants is our presence. at a Seder. That's what he asked for. That's what we will do to the best of our abilities. And yes, we are human and we are fallible and we will make mistakes. God knows this and God loves this. So don't be intimidated. Don't get negative. Don't sit at the Seder and cry. You know, there was one joke online. It said, wouldn't it be ironic if we cancel Passover because of a plague? This is the holiday of plagues that took us out of Egypt. So it would be ironic to cancel Pesach because of a plague. So don't let that dampen the mitzvah. Don't let it dampen the experience. Don't invite it into your Seder. And it's almost guaranteed. This Seder you will remember forever. And you will talk about it forever. Because it's going to be something different for everybody.